For most of human history, money didn't exist, not in the way we understand it today. Anthropologist David Graeber once wrote, "For thousands of years, humans lived not with money, but with webs of obligation." And historian Niall Ferguson famously said, "Money is trust inscribed." But how did we go from simple obligations to a global financial system powerful enough to shape nations, build empires, and cause entire economies to collapse? This is the true story of money. A story far older and far stranger than you might imagine. We often hear that money began as a solution to the inefficiencies of barter. The classic example goes like this: you have grain, I have a cow. We argue about value, fail to agree, and eventually invent money. It's a simple story, a practical story. But according to Graeber, it's also almost entirely fictional. In his milestone book, Debt: The First 5,000 Years, he explains that anthropologists have never found a society that relied primarily on everyday barter. People exchanged goods, yes, but within systems of trust, honor, social obligation, and long-term credit. In other words, the earliest economies were not built on objects, but on relationships. Money would come later, not because barter failed, but because societies grew too large, too complex, and too interconnected for memory and obligation alone. Before coins, before paper, before banks, humans used nearly anything to store or represent value. Salt bricks, grain, beads, tea, livestock, tools, shells, especially cowrie shells, found across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. These early forms of value weren't chosen randomly. They shared consistent traits. They were portable, divisible, recognizable, and difficult to counterfeit. And around 600 BCE, in the ancient kingdom of Lydia, a breakthrough occurred. The first standardized metal coins stamped with a royal seal. For the first time in human history, value wasn't just understood, it was guaranteed by authority. Coins spread rapidly: Greece, Persia, Rome, China. Money was no longer a relationship. It was becoming an institution. Every empire that adopted coinage quickly discovered the same truth. Money isn't just an economic tool, it's a political one. When the state issues money, it gains the power to tax, to wage war, to reward loyalty, and to control resources. Economist Murray Rothbard summarized this perfectly. The history of money is the history of governments attempting to control it, and of markets trying to escape that control. This tension between state power and economic freedom has shaped monetary evolution for more than 2,000 years. While Europe and the Middle East relied on metal coins, China took a bold step centuries earlier. During the Song dynasty, merchants began using promissory notes, early paper money, because transporting heavy iron coins was impractical. At first, people distrusted this strange new form of value. Paper wasn't shiny, it wasn't rare, it wasn't treasure, but the government backed it. And when states enforce value, people eventually accept it. Felix Martin writes in Money, the Unauthorized Biography, "Money is not a thing, it is a system of relationships, a technology for recording debts."
The ink is steady.
Paper money was exactly that, a new technology for recording trust. Eventually, the idea spread across the world. It would change everything. As trade intensified across continents, merchants faced a new challenge. How do you safely move silver and gold across dangerous routes? That responsibility fell to early bankers. In medieval Italy, especially in Florence, one family transformed finance forever: the Medici. What began as merchants holding deposits soon evolved into full-scale financial innovation. Ledger systems, transfer bills, and what many consider the ancestor of the modern checking account. Banks became the memory of the economy. They recorded who owed what to whom. They turned trust into infrastructure. Money was no longer just an object. It had become information. For centuries, nations tied their currencies to gold. It was simple, elegant, and difficult to manipulate. Historian Niall Ferguson describes gold as the anchor that held the financial world in balance. The gold standard limited inflation, stabilized global trade, and created a shared monetary language across nations. But it also imposed a rigid structure on economies. When populations grew or trade expanded, money supplies couldn't adapt. Crises became harder to manage. Yet for almost 100 years, the world believed in gold until it didn't. When the world entered the 20th century, it carried with it a belief that had shaped generations. Money must be backed by gold. For decades, nations promised that every paper note could be exchanged for a precise amount of the precious metal. It was simple, logical, and comforting, but it was also a system built on fragility. The First World War revealed the first cracks. Governments needed far more money than the gold in their vaults could justify. They suspended convertibility, printed freely, and hoped the world wouldn't notice. But the illusion never fully recovered. The historian Niall Ferguson wrote, "The stability of the gold standard was an illusion, a beautiful one, but an illusion nonetheless." By 1929, the illusion shattered completely. The Great Depression devastated economies, banks collapsed, and nations scrambled for survival. They devalued their currencies, restricted gold exports, and abandoned the rules they once treated as sacred. Still, one country held on longer than everyone else: the United States. For decades, the US dollar was the anchor of the global monetary order, the currency other nations trusted more than their own. But in the late 1960s, pressure built again. Countries demanded their gold back. American gold reserves dropped at an alarming pace. The system was collapsing, and the world didn't know it yet. Then, on August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon addressed the nation and announced a decision that would rewrite economic history. The United States would no longer convert dollars into gold. The gold standard was over. Economist Murray Rothbard described that moment as the day money became entirely a creature of government decree. From that point forward, money was no longer tied to any physical commodity. It became fiat, value determined solely by trust, policy, and expectation. This shift gave governments immense power and introduced a level of uncertainty the world had never experienced before. With the gold anchor gone, the world entered a new monetary era, one defined not by metal, but by data. The rise of computers in the 1970s and 1980s transformed the nature of money itself. Balances were no longer pieces of paper or bags of coins. They were numbers stored in machines. A person's wealth became a digital record, infinitely movable, instantly changeable. Credit cards exploded in popularity, offering a new kind of purchasing power. Money you could spend before you even had it. Banks discovered that credit was far more profitable than cash, and people discovered that debt could quietly shape their entire lives. By the 2000s, online banking blurred the line between currency and code. Economist Felix captured this shift perfectly. Money is not a thing. It is a system of recording promises. Those promises became the architecture of the global economy. Payments flowed across continents in milliseconds. Currencies rose and fell based on expectations, headlines, and algorithms. Money was now a digital organism, constantly moving, adapting, evolving. And then came the shock that changed everything. Bitcoin. In 2008, during another financial crisis, a person or group known as Satoshi Nakamoto proposed a radical idea: a currency with no government, no central bank, and no single point of control. For the first time in history, trust could be placed not in institutions, but in math.
Energy now.
Blockchain
Divert
technology
remaining
opened the
assets to
door to
safe harbor
decentralized finance, digital assets, and a completely new way of imagining what money could be. Yet even with all this change, one question remains unanswered. What will money become when it no longer needs to exist physically at all?